Hi, I'm Eden, and if you've ever been told to keep the peace while someone else set your world on fire, you might understand where this is going. I wasn't born bitter. I wasn't born skeptical. I was born with a belief, naive maybe, but deeply rooted, that hard work and quiet loyalty would be enough. That being the daughter who didn't cause drama, who paid her bills, who didn't ask for much, meant I had earned some form of protection, a place at the table, or at least a little respect. But respect in my family wasn't earned through effort. It was inherited by noise. And Aubrey, my older sister, she was all noise. We grew up in Olympia, Washington, in a modest 3-bedroom where the wallpaper peeled slightly in the corners, and the hallway always smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and fabric softener. My dad was a union welder, hardworking, honest, distant. My mom ran a small daycare out of the house, always in a rush, always emotionally spent by 4 p.m., and Aubrey, she was the show, captain of the cheer team, bright blonde hair and dimples so sharp she could weaponize them. Every teacher, every neighbor, every family friend adored her. She was the kind of girl people assumed would go far, even when she didn't do much to earn it. I used to love her. Maybe I still did, in that complicated, leftover way you feel about people who once braided your hair and then later used those same fingers to twist a knife behind your back. We hadn't lived under the same roof in years, but in the fall of what I thought would be the turning point of my life, she came back into it in the most unexpected and unwelcome way. It started on a Thursday. I remember because it was payday, and I had just hit a savings milestone I'd been working toward for 6 years, $95,000, all mine, clean, earned from 14-hour shifts, skipped vacations, and living in rentals that barely passed code inspections. That money was my ticket out of uncertainty. My down payment on something permanent, a place of my own, a home. That night, I drove to my parents' house. They still lived in the same creaky place I'd grown up in. My mom had invited both Aubrey and me for dinner, a rare occurrence. I should have known something was off the minute I stepped through the front door. Aubrey was already there, barefoot, lounging on the couch like she owned it. She wore a new Apple Watch and had long acrylic nails in a shade that probably cost more than my week's groceries. "Hey, little sis," she said, barely glancing up from her phone. "Still working at that boring marketing firm?" I forced a smile. "Still investing in a future, yeah." Mom was in the kitchen. She looked tired, the way she always did when Aubrey was around. I hadn't planned to tell them about my house fund. I really hadn't. But over dinner, after a couple glasses of cheap Chardonnay, it slipped out. "I've saved enough," I said, smiling softly. "I'm finally ready to put an offer in on a condo near Green Lake. Nothing fancy, but it's mine." Dad grunted approvingly. "That's amazing," Mom said, though she sounded distracted. "You've always been good with money." Aubrey looked up sharply. "Wait, really? You saved almost $100,000 just sitting there?" I laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, well, years of saying no to myself." She tilted her head, her tone suddenly sticky sweet. "That's incredible, Eden, truly. I mean, some of us haven't been so lucky, you know." Mom sighed. "Your sister's been through a rough patch." I looked at Aubrey. Perfect nails, new phone, Louis Vuitton wallet sitting brazenly on the counter. "Rough patch?" I asked. "She's trying," Mom said defensively, "but her old car broke down and she needs something reliable to get to work." "Work?" I blinked. "She's working again?" "Freelance sales," Aubrey said breezily, "but I need something respectable to show up in. You know, image is everything." Something in me tightened. I pushed my plate back and stood up. "Well, I'm glad you're working. That's good." It was only later, much later, that I realized this wasn't just a casual conversation. It was a setup. 3 weeks passed. Then one morning I checked my bank account. $11,027. I blinked, refreshed the app, thought it was a glitch, thought maybe I'd accidentally moved the money into the wrong account. But it wasn't a mistake. And it wasn't a glitch. Someone had accessed my linked account, the one I'd opened years ago with Dad's name on it, back when I was too young to qualify solo. We'd never removed him. I never thought to. I trusted him, but someone had used his name and my credentials to approve a wire transfer to Aubrey. I showed up at my parents' house with the bank statements in hand, my heart thundering. Mom opened the door with a look of guilt already smeared across her face. "You should have told me," I said quietly. She didn't deny it, didn't ask what I was talking about. It was just a loan, she said. She needed help. She stole from me, I snapped, louder than I meant to. You helped her forge access to my money. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a crime. Dad stepped in from the living room, arms folded. Don't exaggerate, he muttered. We thought you agreed. Agreed? I shook the papers in my hand. I didn't even know. Aubrey sauntered in from the kitchen. God, Eden, it's not like I burned it. I used it. You'll get it back. On what planet do you get to use my house fund for a freaking Lexus? I cried. Because I'm your sister, she shouted back. You'd let me live on the street instead? You live with Mom and Dad rent-free. You didn't need a Lexus. You wanted to look important. She didn't respond, but Mom did. You're making this ugly, Eden, she said softly. We thought you'd understand. You always understand. That was the moment something inside me cracked, quietly, like a thin sheet of ice just beginning to split under pressure. I'd always been the one who understands, the one who gives, the one who swallows the insult, the hurt, the theft, and still shows up for dinner. But not this time, not anymore. There's a sound your heart makes when it realizes it's been replaced by a transaction. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It thuds, hollow and heavy, like a drawer slammed shut inside your chest. That morning, after the confrontation, I drove straight to the bank, not to plead, to confirm. The teller, a woman with kind eyes and nervous fingers, looked at the screen, then at me, then back again. Are you sure you authorized this transfer? She asked softly. I'm sure, I said. I didn't. She paused, then glanced around before lowering her voice. This isn't just a transfer. It's a full authority signature override. A power of attorney adjustment was submitted 2 months ago, giving permission to Mr. Dwyer to act on your behalf for linked accounts. Mr. Dwyer. My father. I could feel heat creeping up my neck. I didn't sign that. She nodded like she'd heard that before, but wasn't allowed to say it. If you want to file a claim for financial abuse, we have forms, but you'll need to hire counsel separately. We can freeze the account, but since it's legally altered, any reversal has to go through arbitration. Arbitration, counsel, legal fees. It hit me in slow layers. They didn't just take my money. They weaponized trust. They used my last name like a crowbar, pried open everything I built, and didn't blink while doing it. I spent the rest of the day on hold with attorneys, legal aid centers, and fraud units that couldn't help me because, technically, this wasn't fraud. Not in the criminal sense, not when it's family. A lawyer finally took my call around 3:15 p.m. I gave her the summary. She was blunt, which I appreciated. If your father submitted the paperwork and the bank accepted it, your case shifts into gray territory. It's not criminal unless you can prove signature forgery or coercion. But I never gave him that kind of access. She sighed. Did you sign anything over the last year you didn't fully read? I thought about the retirement investment review Dad asked me to sign during Christmas, the one he said would just update your file at the credit union. My stomach dropped. Maybe, I whispered. Well, the attorney replied, if you did and they used it to reframe your access privileges, we'll need to review the document line by line. It's not uncommon for intra-family financial abuse to happen this way, through disguised paperwork. I went home and tore through my desk drawer, found the paper. There it was. A document, masked as a review form, but buried under jargon, was a clause that redesignated limited financial control for estate assistance. It wasn't oversight, it was orchestrated, and it wasn't just my sister, it was my father too. The next Sunday, I showed up unannounced. I didn't ring the doorbell. I walked straight in. They were having coffee like nothing happened. Aubrey on her phone, Dad reading the paper, Mom chopping strawberries. I dropped the form on the kitchen table. This, I said, my voice low and steady, is how you took what wasn't yours. Dad looked up. He didn't flinch. You signed it, he said calmly. You misled me. You told me it was about retirement options. You didn't read it. Mom stepped in, defensive. You always rush through things, Eden. No, I said, sharper now. You always assume I'll clean up after your decisions. Aubrey chuckled under her breath. God, dramatic much? It was a car, not a war crime. I turned to her. You forged access to my savings for a Lexus. Technically, she said, sipping her coffee, Dad helped. You should be mad at him. She smiled at me, daring me to say something else, so I didn't. I picked up the paper, folded it slowly, and slipped it into my bag. You'll hear from my attorney. I didn't go for revenge that day. I went for confirmation, and what I got was clarity, because there's a line between disappointment and decision, and standing in that kitchen, I finally crossed it. Ever wondered how far someone would go if they believed you'd never fight back? Grief doesn't only visit after death. Sometimes it arrives on an ordinary Tuesday morning, holding a cup of coffee and acting like it belongs. That was the day I realized I hadn't just lost money, I had lost place. Place in my family, in their stories, in their future. After that final encounter in the kitchen, I didn't go back. Not for holidays, not for birthdays. I didn't even respond when my mom texted me a picture of Aubrey in her new car with a lazy caption. She looks happy, doesn't she? Maybe things are turning around for her. I moved out of my apartment 3 weeks later. Not out of impulse, out of necessity. Because I knew if I stayed in that space, I'd spend too many nights rereading bank statements like crime scenes and wondering how I let it happen. I found a quieter rental in a suburb where no one knew my last name. The kind of place with mismatched streetlights and coffee shops where the barista asks for your order without needing your name. I like that. The anonymity, the reset. But silence has its own weight. It doesn't scream, it seeps. There were nights I caught myself dialing my mom's number, thumb hovering over the green call button, remembering the way she used to hum while folding laundry. I missed that version of her, the one before secrets and sides. But she didn't call. She didn't check in, not once. Instead, I got a voicemail from my aunt, my mom's sister, 2 months after the fallout. Hey, Eden, I don't want to get in the middle, but I heard what happened. Just wanted to say I don't believe that was right. You didn't deserve that, and you're not alone. It was the first time I cried. Not because of guilt or rage, but because someone saw me. About a month later, I got an invitation. Aubrey's housewarming brunch. Aubrey bought a house. The card was obnoxious, rose gold calligraphy, champagne background, RSVP through a custom QR code, like she was starring in some kind of Instagram Hallmark movie. My chest tightened as I read it, because even after everything, even after stealing my down payment, she wanted me to watch her build the life that should have been mine. I didn't RSVP, but I kept the card. The weekend of the brunch, I went hiking alone, up on Cougar Mountain where the pine smell punches your lungs and the wind whistles in places you forgot could be touched. I sat on a flat rock near the summit, phone in airplane mode, eyes on the horizon, and that's when it hit me. I didn't need revenge to start. I needed distance to rebuild. But revenge would still come, not fire and screaming, not courtrooms or subpoenas. That's not how they'd taught me to fight. No, I do it the way they never saw coming. By being better, louder in the quietest way possible. I opened a fresh notebook that day. On the first page I wrote, "They bet I wouldn't become anything without them. Now I'll become someone they'll have to hear about secondhand." Back in the city, I quit my job the following week. Everyone was shocked. I'd been their most reliable account manager, but I wasn't going to pour my energy into building someone else's empire anymore. Instead, I started freelancing, marketing work, branding, storytelling for small businesses, startups that needed identity as badly as I did. I worked out of my tiny kitchen, often in pajamas. Sometimes at 2 a.m., I ate canned soup for days, slept with spreadsheets open, burned through savings, this time by choice. But something changed. One of my early clients, a local candle maker, messaged me one night after their rebrand launched. "Eden, we hit our monthly goal in 3 days. You gave us more than a logo. You gave us a story people trust." I stared at that message longer than I should have. Because it wasn't just about candles, it was the first time I realized if I could build trust for strangers, I could build something for myself. Then, one afternoon, I saw the post. Aubrey had posted a photo of her Lexus, same car, same smug grin, but this time with a caption that made my hands freeze. "Officially VP of Client Relations. Crazy where life takes you when you stop waiting on handouts." Handouts. She meant me, and I knew it. Every word, every fake humble brag was a direct jab. But here's what she didn't know. The firm that hired her, I just signed a private consulting contract with their biggest competitor. And the name on the contract wasn't Eden Dwyer. It was Hollow Pine Studio. My studio. My creation, anonymous, strategic, and soon enough powerful enough to make moves she wouldn't even see coming. Ever rebuilt something from the ashes, only to realize the fire gave you better light? There's a kind of power in being underestimated. It doesn't feel like power at first. It feels like silence, like being talked over, dismissed, called sweet or stable, as a way of being boxed in and ignored. But when you learn to grow in that silence, when you learn to build beneath their radar, that's when it becomes a weapon. And I was done being quiet for their comfort. By spring, Hollow Pine Studio was more than just a side project. It had become my full-time focus and my armor. I never used my name. I let my work speak. I curated the brand to sound like a boutique firm with a confident voice and no visible founder. The anonymity gave me space to move without being recognized. And that privacy, it turned out to be priceless, especially the day we were pitched a contract that made my stomach twist. A mid-sized consumer goods company, stylish, overpriced home goods mostly, reached out. They wanted a full-scale rebrand to stand apart from newer competitors. The proposal came through a shared platform, and as I scrolled through the client dossier, a name stopped me cold. Marwin and Pierce, Aubrey's employer, the very company she'd boasted about, using it to flaunt her new VP title. I sat back in my chair, the hum of my laptop loud in the stillness. This wasn't just coincidence. This was opportunity, and I didn't hesitate. We pitched. We won. 2 weeks later, I sat in a conference call with 3 members of their executive team, none of them Aubrey, not yet. My voice remained off-cam. My business partner Lisa did the talking. She was our client-facing lead, a single mom from Portland with razor-sharp instincts and a calm demeanor that put people at ease. They had no idea who was behind the strategy. They just knew it worked. And it did. We rewrote their tagline, redesigned packaging, and implemented a social campaign that pulled their product engagement up 38% in the first month. The client was thrilled. So thrilled, in fact, they brought in their internal sales team for alignment. And that's when I heard her voice. Aubrey. She joined the call like she owned the room. That tone, bright, rehearsed, self-satisfied, grated in the way only a voice you've grown up resenting can. Lisa nudged her glasses higher and gave me a quick glance through Zoom. We'd been working together long enough for her to pick up on the shift in my breathing. I sent her a Slack message, short and clipped. Don't mention me. At all. Aubrey started with a performance. The new branding? Honestly, it's stunning. Really resonates. My team's obsessed. I leaned back, crossed my arms, listened. She had no clue who had orchestrated the entire campaign. And when Lisa thanked her for the feedback and asked if there were any concerns, Aubrey giggled. Just a small thing, she said. I do think the tone might be a little soft, like it almost sounds like a woman wrote it. Lisa didn't even blink. A woman did. Several, in fact. A pause. Ah, Aubrey replied, voice tight. Well, as long as it converts, right? I muted the call so no one could hear me laugh. But the real twist came a week later. I received an anonymous tip via our contact form. Someone in Marwin and Pierce's HR department had recognized content similarities between Hollow Pine's deliverables and another proposal Aubrey had submitted for an internal promotion. I asked for evidence. They sent a deck. It was my work. Our taglines, our content flow, even a mock-up that hadn't yet gone live, all repurposed in Aubrey's internal pitch as if it were her own. She had stolen the strategy, again. And I had the receipts. I sat on the decision for 3 days, not because I was unsure of what to do, but because I wanted to be intentional. This wasn't about humiliation, it was about boundary. It was about calling theft by its name, even if it wore family skin. So I submitted a quiet email to their legal department listing the intellectual property violations. I included timestamps, drafts, and a single statement. This content was created and licensed exclusively through Hollow Pine Studio. Any internal repurposing without attribution constitutes a breach of contract. We will escalate only if unresolved. They responded within 48 hours. Aubrey was placed on leave. The fallout wasn't public. It didn't make headlines. It didn't erupt on social media. But I heard through channels, quiet murmurs in professional circles, that her reputation took a hit she wouldn't recover from easily. And I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like I had taken back something intangible that had been stolen long before the money. My voice. A week after the company pulled her from active accounts, I got a text from my mom, the first in months. I don't know what you did, but your sister is a mess. You really couldn't let it go? No apology, no curiosity, just accusation wrapped in passive guilt. I didn't reply, because I'd finally learned silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's a boundary with teeth. Ever been told to let it go when all you really wanted was to be seen for what was taken from you? Some betrayals you survive, others you metabolize. You turn them into something so sharp, so precise, they become the very edge you stand on while building a different kind of future. By summer, Hollow Pine Studio had tripled in size. We picked up more clients than we could reasonably manage, but I kept pushing. I wasn't chasing income anymore. I was chasing a structure no one could take from me, and somewhere in that climb, the pain turned productive. Until the day I found out my name had been used again, without my permission. It came in the form of a denial letter from a credit union I didn't bank with. We regret to inform you that your application for the personal line of credit in the amount of $45,000 has been declined due to inconsistencies with your stated income and current employment status. I blinked at the letter like it was in another language. I hadn't applied for a loan. Not recently, not ever with them. I called the number listed. The woman on the other end was polite but firm. Yes, ma'am, we processed this application under the name Eden Dwyer. The paperwork came through 3 weeks ago, electronically signed. Your employment was listed as Marwin and Pierce Executive Division, and supporting documents included 2 pay stubs and a W-2. My chest tightened. I haven't worked there. Ever. There was a pause. Then she said gently, I'd suggest filing a fraud report immediately. I knew who it was before I even finished the call. Aubrey hadn't just used my name. She'd forged an entire employment history around it. Why? Because hers was tainted now. Her credit was ruined after the company incident, and she likely couldn't get a loan without using someone else's identity. And I'd made the mistake of once sharing too much, an old digital file folder for joint taxes, left over from a time when she convinced me to help her build credit. I'd forgotten about it. She hadn't. I sat on my floor for a full hour, not crying, not shaking, just planning. And then I called my lawyer. The legal process was slower than I wanted, but thorough. The good news, we had a paper trail. The bad news, it required me to step forward publicly, not just as Eden Dwyer business owner, but as a victim of identity theft. I had avoided labels like victim my entire life. But this time, it was necessary. Not for vengeance, for record. Because if I didn't stop her now, she'd keep doing it. To me. To someone else. And she'd always get the benefit of the doubt because people like her know how to sound desperate without sounding dangerous. We pressed charges, quietly, precisely, and backed by undeniable evidence. Forged documents, digital footprints, IP addresses. But Aubrey didn't know she was under investigation, not until a police officer knocked on her door with a summons. I didn't see it happen. But I did receive the voicemail she left me 2 days later. Eden, it's Aubrey. God, I don't even know what to say. They showed up, at my job, Eden. Do you understand what you've done? You're making this into something it doesn't need to be. We're sisters, family. You should have come to me instead of lawyers. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just trying to keep my life together. Please, call me back. I saved the message but didn't respond. Because she wasn't sorry. She was scared. There's a difference. Weeks passed. The case moved forward. She pled down to avoid trial, probation, community service, repayment of damages, and mandatory financial counseling. Her public record was marred just enough to affect future employment. It wasn't prison, but it was something permanent, a mark, a consequence. Then came the final twist. In late September, I received an anonymous email from a furniture liquidation service. We're reaching out in regard to your recent bid interest, submitted for item hash 2187, listed as used Lexus SUV 2021 champagne color minor interior damage. I stared at the image attached. It was her car. My car, technically, the one she bought with my stolen house fund. I hadn't submitted the bid, but someone had done it in my name through a public auction site. Maybe a bot. Maybe fate. But the option to confirm the bid was still live. I clicked accept. It arrived 4 days later. The moment I opened the car door and sat behind the wheel, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel cruelty. I felt something quieter, like closure that didn't need to be announced. I drove it once, around the block, windows down, music low. Then I listed it for a donation to a women's financial recovery nonprofit, the same one I'd quietly been funding under Hollow Pine's name, because the truth was, I didn't need the car. I needed to know I could choose what to do with it this time. The story didn't end with the car, or with court documents, or donation receipts, or even the slow public unraveling of my sister's professional persona. If anything, those were just closures on paper, neat, documented, but the real ending, the one that mattered, came later. Quietly, unplanned. Because what you don't realize about reclaiming your life is that it's not always about justice. Sometimes it's about witnessing who still insists on your silence. It started with a call I didn't expect. A landline, unknown number. I let it ring out, ignored it. Then it came again the next day, and the next, until finally curiosity got the better of me. I answered just in case it was one of the nonprofits or vendors I worked with through Hollow Pine. But it wasn't. It was my father. His voice was smaller than I remembered. Age didn't sound kind on him. Eden, he said as if the name had grown foreign in his mouth. I thought maybe you'd pick up. I didn't say anything. I just wanted to say we didn't handle things right, I know that now. Still, I said nothing. She's not doing well, he continued. Aubrey, she's in real trouble. Is she in jail? A pause. No, he replied. But she's close. Her credit's destroyed. She can't find work, and she's been cut off by almost everyone. I exhaled slowly, looking out the window at the life I'd built, solid and quiet. And? I asked. And your mother thought, maybe you'd help, just this once. There it was, the unspoken expectation rising from the grave. Be the stable one, the fixer, the forgiver. I could have hung up. Instead, I chose something harder. No, I said softly. I'm not saving her from consequences you both helped create. She's still your sister. No, I replied, the words sharp but not angry. She's a woman who spent years borrowing my name like a spare key. I ended the call before he could respond. Later that night, I found myself rereading an old message from my Aunt May. You're not alone. It had been over a year since I'd heard those words the first time, but now I finally believed them. Because being alone didn't mean being unworthy. It meant drawing a line and keeping it intact. 2 weeks later, I received a formal invitation to my cousin's wedding, a small backyard ceremony. My name was handwritten. My +1 box left blank. I almost didn't go, but I did. And when I walked in, wearing a simple slate blue dress and no intention of pretending, my mother turned to see me from across the yard. Her mouth dropped open just slightly, then pressed into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She approached after the ceremony, wine glass in hand. You look good, she said, cautious. I am good. A beat. Your sister's not here. I assumed. She's living with a friend now, still looking for work. I nodded, not out of sympathy, but acknowledgement. I hope she finds something that makes her better, I said. She's broken. She was never held accountable until it broke her. We didn't say much after that, but as I turned to leave, my mother touched my elbow gently. Are you happy? She asked. I paused. I'm free, I said, and that's more than I ever was in that house. 3 months later, Hollow Pine was nominated for an independent business grant, $100,000 for expanding women-led enterprises. We won. And I used it not just to grow, but to start a new division, Dwyer & Company. I almost didn't use my last name. But in the end, I did. Not because I owed it to anyone, but because I'd redefined what it meant. It no longer belonged to the people who'd failed me. It belonged to the woman who survived them. A month after the grant announcement, I received a letter. Handwritten, sloppy penmanship. It was from Aubrey. I unfolded it slowly. The first line was simple. You were never the weak one. I just made sure everyone treated you like you were. I didn't read the rest. I didn't need to. Because some apologies come too late to matter. And some legacies, you rewrite them, one quiet boundary at a time. Ever held your last name like a burden, until you made it mean something only you could define? In the end, what I reclaimed wasn't just money or reputation, it was myself. I learned that boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary. That being quiet doesn't mean being weak, and that healing sometimes looks like walking away with your head high and your heart intact. If you've ever been the one expected to stay silent while others cross the line, I hope this story reminds you you're allowed to choose you. What would you have done in my place? Ever had to stand your ground when family wouldn't? If this video spoke to you, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from or what part hit home. And hey, if you're still here, consider subscribing to the channel. More real stories are waiting for you.